In July 2007 at 9 p.m., the thick summer air hung heavy around the old family house, clinging like a warning that this reunion was about to go horribly wrong. Mia and her family had gathered in the grand, creaky house for their annual reunion. But tonight, something was chillingly off. Tension crackled in the air, hidden beneath polite smiles and laughter, as if every shadow held a secret. Mia's pulse quickened as she moved through the living room, her eyes drawn to the faded family portraits. Every face seemed to watch her, their silent expressions hiding stories she was never meant to discover. Her gaze fell on her mother, Karen, standing by the window. In that moment, Mia felt a strange shiver, the type of chill that strikes deep, unshakable, and almost primal. Karen looked out into the darkness with a blank stare, her face clouded with an expression Mia had never seen before. Was it guilt? Or perhaps something even darker? No, Mia thought, shaking off the unsettling feeling. Her mother was always the heart of the family, the one who could do no wrong, or at least that's what Mia had always believed. But tonight, the cracks in that perfect image were beginning to show, and Mia couldn't shake the sensation that her mother was hiding something that could tear their family apart. The reunion had started as a warm gathering, with family members arriving from near and far to the sprawling old house where Karen had spent her childhood. Mia was thrilled to catch up with her cousins, uncles, and aunts. But as the evening wore on, she began noticing small, strange details. Karen kept glancing nervously at one of her distant relatives, Uncle Ray, an enigmatic man who was barely spoken of, yet seemed to be constantly watching her mother with an intensity that made Mia uncomfortable. Why did Uncle Ray look at her that way, as if they shared a dark secret only they knew? Throughout the evening, whispers floated around the room, and Mia began to piece together fragments of conversations she overheard. Aunt Louise, who was known for her sharp memory, mentioned an unresolved matter that she couldn't shake. Cousin Derek seemed unusually quiet, his eyes darting around the room like he was on edge. And then there was Cousin Lila, who didn't seem her usual talkative self. She'd stare at Karen, then quickly look away whenever their eyes met. Each of them seemed to know something Mia herself was completely in the dark about. The unease crept up on Mia slowly, a feeling like a low hum that refused to go away. When her mother noticed Mia's concerned look, she quickly plastered on her familiar, warm smile. "Everything all right, honey?" Karen asked, her voice steady and motherly. But Mia noticed a slight tremor in her mother's hand as she reached out to touch her shoulder. What was it that her mother was so afraid of? And why did Mia feel like she was on the verge of uncovering a dark truth? But it wasn't until later that night, when Mia wandered down to the basement searching for extra blankets, that she stumbled upon something chilling. Tucked away in an old cabinet was a stack of faded, crinkled papers. As Mia's fingers traced the edges, she realized they were old family documents, letters written in rushed, frantic handwriting. And as she began to read, her heart skipped a beat. These letters, they spoke of secrets she couldn't comprehend, stories of betrayal and guilt that pointed to someone in the family hiding a dark past. And worst of all, they hinted that the person responsible was close, someone she trusted, someone whose true identity Mia was about to uncover. The realization hit Mia like a punch to the gut. The mother she had trusted her whole life. Was she truly who she appeared to be? Or had Mia been blind to a chilling truth hiding in plain sight? Mia shoved the letters back into the cabinet, heart pounding, as footsteps echoed down the basement stairs. Startled, she turned to see Karen standing there, her face unreadable in the dim light. For a split second, Mia thought she saw a flash of something dark in her mother's eyes and something that made her stomach twist. But then Karen's usual, reassuring smile appeared, as if nothing were amiss. "Looking for something, sweetheart?" Karen's voice was calm, but to Mia it sounded laced with an edge she hadn't noticed before. For a moment, Mia couldn't speak. She clutched the letters tightly, her mind racing. How well did she really know her own mother? And what dark secrets had been buried within her family's past? As the family reunion continued, Mia couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that had taken root. She moved through the rooms in a daze, her thoughts looping back to the stack of letters she'd found hidden in the basement. Why had her mother been so on edge? And why did that uneasiness seem to bleed into the rest of her family? It was as if everyone knew something but was too afraid to speak. Mia decided to take a deep breath and focus on observing, watching her family members closely for any clue. She joined Aunt Louise in the kitchen, hoping to clear her mind, but it didn't take long before the conversation turned to Karen. "I haven't seen Karen this tense in years," Aunt Louise said in a low voice, chopping vegetables with an almost mechanical focus. "She's usually the life of these reunions. But tonight, well, something's clearly on her mind." She glanced at Mia, her eyes narrowing slightly. "You've noticed it too, haven't you?" Mia nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her aunt's words. Was she finally starting to see her mother through new eyes? Or was she just getting swept up in the strange energy of the night? When Mia walked back into the living room, she saw her mother standing by the staircase with Uncle Ray. They were deep in a quiet, intense conversation, one that grew hushed the moment Mia stepped into view. Ray's piercing gaze shifted to her, as if he knew she was listening in. The tension between them was unmistakable. But why? What history did her mother share with Ray, and why did it seem dangerous? As the night wore on, small incidents began to pile up, each one stranger than the last. First, Mia's cousin Lila mentioned an old rumor she'd overheard once as a child, a story about a long-lost family member who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. No one ever talked about it openly, she explained, as if there were a collective understanding among the adults to keep the past buried. But as a child, she had sensed the unease and fear that blanketed any mention of the family member. Mia felt her heart race. "Who was this family member?" she asked. "Oh, it was before we were born," Lila said dismissively, but Mia could see the doubt in her cousin's eyes. "I don't know. Mom always said it wasn't our business to worry about. But the way she talked about it, it just gave me chills." Later, Mia found herself alone in the hallway with Uncle Ray, whose gaze had been tracking her for the better part of the evening. "You're curious, aren't you?" he said, his voice low, almost conspiratorial. "Always digging around, looking for answers." Mia felt the hairs on her arms stand up. "What do you mean?" He leaned in closer, his voice barely a whisper. "You know, sometimes it's better not to dig too deep. Some things, they're hidden for a reason." A chill ran down Mia's spine. Was this a warning or something more sinister? What exactly was Uncle Ray hinting at? And why did he seem so intent on steering her away from whatever secrets her mother was hiding? Despite the mounting pressure to leave the past alone, Mia couldn't stop herself. She was drawn to the basement once more, as if pulled by some unseen force. She slipped away from the reunion under the guise of finding extra candles, her heart racing as she tiptoed down the creaky steps. Back in the basement, she opened the cabinet and retrieved the stack of letters, scanning them by the dim light of her phone. This time, she read more carefully, piecing together the cryptic phrases that hinted at betrayal, secrecy, and an overwhelming sense of guilt. One particular letter caught her attention. A note written in Karen's handwriting, but filled with words that sounded nothing like the mother Mia thought she knew. "Some sins can never be forgiven," it read, "and those who try to forget them will be haunted until they pay their dues." Mia's blood ran cold as she tried to process the implications. What sin was her mother referring to? And why did this sound less like a confession and more like a warning? Just then, a noise broke the silence. Mia's breath caught as she turned, finding herself face to face with Uncle Ray, who stood at the bottom of the stairs watching her. His eyes flickered with something dark, something that made Mia's skin crawl. "What are you doing down here?" he asked, his voice calm, yet carrying a hint of menace. Mia clutched the letters to her chest, her mind racing. She had to get out, had to escape his intense gaze in the suffocating presence of that dark, empty basement. But as she squeezed past him to climb the stairs, she realized she wasn't just afraid of the secrets hidden in those letters. She was afraid of the people who knew about them, the ones who were determined to keep the truth buried. Mia returned to the reunion feeling like she was holding her breath. She kept glancing over her shoulder, half expecting Uncle Ray to appear again, his dark gaze watching her every move. The letters felt heavy in her hand, like a forbidden burden, a connection to a side of her mother she'd never known. As she joined her family back in the living room, her mother was speaking animatedly to Aunt Louise and a few other relatives. Her usual cheerful smile stretched wide, but now that smile looked hollow, forced. Mia could see the way Karen's hand trembled as she gestured, the quick dart of her eyes every time someone spoke her name. Mia couldn't shake the feeling that her mother was hiding something terrible that had twisted her mother's charm into a facade. But what? And why did the thought of confronting her mother fill her with a strange, intense fear? Just as she was trying to gather her courage, her cousin Lila sidled up next to her, whispering in a low voice, "Did you know Uncle Ray and your mom dated when they were young?" Mia's heart skipped a beat. "What? When?" Lila shrugged, casting a cautious glance across the room to where Uncle Ray was standing. "I don't know exactly, but it was a long time ago. I overheard Mom saying they were inseparable for a while, but then something happened. She never really talked about it." A shiver crawled up Mia's spine. Her mother and Uncle Ray. Why had she never heard this before? And why was she finding out now, in the middle of this strange, tense family reunion, where everything felt like it was veiled in shadows? Just then, her mother's laughter rang out across the room, an eerie contrast to the unease building in Mia's chest. The sound was sharp, too high, almost like a mask slipping. As the night wore on, Mia's mind raced. There were so many questions, so many loose threads pulling her in different directions, and each answer seemed to lead her closer to something she wasn't sure she wanted to face. She needed to talk to her mother to demand answers about the letters, about Uncle Ray, about the secrets that everyone seemed to be tiptoeing around. Finally, as guests began to settle down and the night grew quieter, Mia found her chance. Her mother was alone in the kitchen, washing dishes, her movements slow and tired. Mia approached, her heart pounding. "Mom," she began, her voice catching. "Can we talk?" Karen turned, a small smile on her lips, but her eyes flickered with something guarded, something distant. "Of course, honey. What's on your mind?" Mia took a deep breath, gripping the edge of the counter. I found some letters," she said carefully, watching for her mother's reaction. "In the basement. They're yours, aren't they?" For a moment, Karen's face went blank. Her hands froze mid-wash, and then she let out a shaky breath, turning off the water and drying her hands with a towel. When she turned back to Mia, her smile was gone. "I told you not to go through my things," she said softly, but there was a strange edge to her voice, a hint of fear, maybe even anger. "I wasn't trying to pry," Mia stammered, feeling a wave of guilt mixed with her confusion. "But Mom, the things you wrote in those letters, they don't sound like you. You said some things can never be forgiven." Karen's eyes widened, her face paling. "Mia, those letters are from a long time ago. They don't mean anything now." But Mia could feel the tension, the unspoken words that lingered between them, thick and suffocating. "Then why are you still so afraid?" Karen's gaze flickered, and for a moment, Mia thought she might actually answer. But just as quickly, her mother's walls went back up, her face hardening as she shook her head. "You're imagining things, Mia. Those letters are just old memories." But Mia wasn't buying it. The fear in her mother's eyes was real, and she was going to find out the truth, even if it meant pulling at every thread until everything unraveled. Mia's mind raced as she walked away from the kitchen, her mother's evasive response gnawing at her. She was hiding something dark, and Mia could feel it in the way her mother's hands had trembled as she spoke. This wasn't just a case of old forgotten love letters. This was something far more disturbing, and the reunion had somehow pulled it all to the surface. As Mia stepped back into the living room, she noticed that Uncle Ray's eyes were fixed on her, intense and unblinking. Her breath hitched as she felt his gaze linger on her just a little too long. He gave her a slight nod and raised his glass, almost as if they were in on a shared secret. The way he looked at her sent chills down her spine. Desperate for answers, Mia decided to search for someone else who might know more about her mother's past, and she found herself drawn to Aunt Louise, her mother's older sister. Aunt Louise was known for her honesty, sometimes brutally so. If anyone in the family would tell her the truth, it was Louise. She waited until her aunt was alone on the back porch, staring out into the night, lost in her thoughts. Mia approached quietly, unsure of how to bring up the topic. "Aunt Louise," she began tentatively, Can I ask you something about Mom? Her aunt looked at her, eyes softening as she gave a slight nod. Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind? Mia took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. I found some old letters, things Mom wrote a long time ago. It seemed like she was involved in something she regretted, something she couldn't forget. Aunt Louise's expression changed instantly, her face tightening as she glanced away. Your mother? She had a difficult past, Mia. There are things that happened back then that still haunt her. Mia felt her pulse quicken. What kind of things? Did it involve Uncle Ray? Aunt Louise sighed deeply, hesitating as she looked down at her hands. Your uncle was complicated. They were very close once, but things between them took a dark turn. She paused and Mia could sense she was holding back. But Aunt Louise, why has Mom never talked about this? And why is she so scared of him? Her aunt's eyes flickered, a sadness deepening the lines on her face. Because sometimes the truth is too painful, even for family. Some things are better left buried. Mia's frustration grew as she realized that Aunt Louise, like her mother, was dancing around the truth. But she couldn't give up, not when the stakes felt so high. She leaned in closer, her voice barely a whisper. Aunt Louise, please, I have to know. Did Uncle Ray do something unforgivable? Her aunt's gaze turned sharp, her voice dropping to a hush. All I'll say is this, Mia. Be careful who you trust in this family. Not everyone is who they seem, and some scars go deeper than you'll ever know. The cryptic warning sent a chill through Mia. She was left with more questions than answers, in the sense that a storm was brewing, ready to break at any moment. As she re-entered the house, her heart heavy, she caught a glimpse of her mother watching her from across the room, a tense, wary expression on her face. It was as if Karen knew that Mia was unraveling her secrets, one by one, and that the closer she got, the more dangerous things would become. But Mia couldn't stop now, not when she was so close to the truth. And as she met her mother's gaze, a realization struck her like a bolt of lightning. Maybe the biggest threat wasn't Uncle Ray at all. Maybe it was someone much closer. The tension in the house was almost unbearable as Mia returned inside, her mind swirling with Aunt Louise's warning. Be careful who you trust in this family. Those words lingered, sending a shiver down her spine. She had come here hoping for laughter, stories, and reconnecting with family. Instead, every corner of the house seemed to hold shadows of secrets and suspicion. It was then that she noticed her cousin, Sam, hovering nearby, watching her with an odd intensity. Sam had always been the quiet, introspective one in the family, someone who was easy to overlook at gatherings. But tonight, something about him felt off, like he was studying her every move. As Mia met his gaze, he looked away quickly, almost guiltily. Curious, she approached him, catching him by the doorway to the den. Sam, she said softly, can we talk for a second? He glanced around, as if checking to see if anyone was listening, then nodded. They slipped outside to the backyard, where the night air felt cool and refreshing against Mia's flushed skin. What's going on, Mia? Sam's voice was barely above a whisper, his eyes darting nervously. You seem different tonight. Mia hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I found something about Mom, and I think there's more to it. Aunt Louise mentioned Uncle Ray, but I feel like everyone's hiding pieces of the puzzle. Sam's face paled. He opened his mouth to respond, then hesitated, glancing back toward the house. You shouldn't dig too deep, Mia. There are things in this family that are best left alone. She felt her frustration boiling over. Why is everyone saying that? Aunt Louise, Mom, even you now. What happened that's so terrible no one will talk about it? He ran a hand through his hair, clearly struggling with something internal. It's not just Uncle Ray, he finally said. Everyone thinks he's the dark figure in the family. But it's more than that. He looked down, his voice dropping even lower. Your mom, she's not who you think she is, Mia. None of us are. His words hit her like a punch. The insinuation was chilling. Could her mother be hiding something darker than she'd ever imagined? Mia felt the ground shifting beneath her as questions flooded her mind. Her entire life, she'd seen her mother as a kind, caring, if occasionally stern woman. But what if that was just a mask? I don't understand, Sam. What are you saying? Her voice was tight with fear, her heart racing. Sam's eyes were haunted. Years ago, before you were born, there was an incident. Something happened that changed everything. I don't know all the details, but I know that Uncle Ray and your mom, they were involved. And whatever it was, it tore the family apart. Dad used to say it was like a curse, a shadow that followed us, one that nobody could escape. A curse, a family shadow. Mia's pulse quickened as her suspicions grew, tinged now with horror. She was beginning to understand that whatever had happened wasn't just a simple family rift. It was something that had scarred them all, and somehow her mother was at the center of it. She glanced back at the house, seeing her mother's silhouette through the window, and felt a sense of dread settle over her. Was her mother truly involved in something sinister? And if so, how had she kept it hidden for so long? "Please, Sam," she whispered, barely able to voice the words. "What was it? What did they do?" Sam took a shaky breath, eyes distant. "I don't know everything, but I heard rumors. Something about a man, a stranger who came to town and ended up gone. Some say he was seen with your mom before he disappeared, but no one ever found proof. It's just whispers, Mia, but enough that everyone still feels it, even now. That's why Aunt Louise warned you. She's seen what digging into this does to people." Mia's mind was spinning. A stranger, a disappearance, and her mother forever linked to it in the family's whispers. As much as she wanted to ignore it, she knew she couldn't. Her mother's quiet life and loving demeanor suddenly felt like a facade, a carefully crafted shield concealing the truth. And as she stood there, staring back at her mother's shadowed figure in the window, Mia understood one thing clearly. This was no simple family reunion. It was a reckoning. Mia barely slept that night, her mind tangled in the web of secrets her family had woven. She tossed and turned, replaying every word Sam had said. Could it be true that her mother was connected to a man's disappearance? And if so, why hadn't anyone confronted her about it? The house was quiet, but the atmosphere felt thick with tension, as though it too was haunted by the past. The next morning, the family gathered in the dining room, their faces weary. Conversation was minimal, with everyone seemingly weighed down by unspoken words. It was then that Mia noticed something unsettling. Her mother, who was usually lively and warm with relatives, seemed distant, almost detached, as though she were miles away from the room. Trying to stay calm, Mia leaned over to her mother. "Mom, are you all right? You seem out of it." Her mother's eyes flickered, a forced smile appearing. "Oh, I'm fine, sweetheart. Just, memories." She quickly turned away, but not before Mia caught a flicker of something dark in her eyes. Guilt. Fear. Mia's heart pounded. She could feel herself standing on the edge of something massive, something dangerous. Yet she couldn't pull away. She needed to know more, even if it meant confronting her own mother. Taking a deep breath, she decided it was time to speak to her openly, regardless of the risks. Later that afternoon, she found her mother alone in the library, thumbing through an old family photo album. Mia's hands shook as she stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The air felt thick, and her mother's gaze was locked on a single photograph, a picture of her, a much younger version, standing beside Uncle Ray. "Mom, we need to talk," Mia began, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother looked up, her expression unreadable. "About what, dear?" Mia swallowed, her words catching in her throat. "About Uncle Ray and what happened between you and him. I overheard Aunt Louise last night, and Sam told me some things." The reaction was immediate. Her mother's face turned pale, and her hands clenched tightly around the photo album. "Sam had no right." Her voice trailed off, and for a moment she looked so fragile, so unlike the mother Mia had known. "Mom, please," Mia's voice cracked. "If something happened, I need to know. Did you know a man who went missing years ago? Someone who came to town and just vanished?" Her mother closed her eyes, a pained expression crossing her face. Mia could see the struggle within her, the internal war between truth and secrecy. After what felt like an eternity, Her mother opened her eyes, her voice soft, almost hollow. Mia, there are things in life that we're better off not knowing. Things that change who we are. Mia felt her patience fraying. Mom, you're talking in riddles. I don't care about secrets or shame. I need the truth. Did you or Uncle Ray have anything to do with that man's disappearance? Her mother's expression shifted to one of deep sorrow. You think so little of me, Mia? She asked, her voice trembling. It's not that, Mom, but everyone here is hinting at things, telling me to be careful. What am I supposed to believe? Her mother's eyes were glassy with unshed tears. All I ever did was protect this family, Mia, but sometimes protection comes at a price. She rose from her chair, her expression distant. This isn't a conversation for today, my love. Let's just let it be for now. Mia's frustration was palpable, but she watched as her mother turned and left the room, her words hanging like a curse. There it was again, another layer of mystery, of horror. It was as though her mother was hiding behind the very shadows that Mia was trying to unveil. Feeling both defeated and more determined than ever, Mia sat down in her mother's vacated chair, flipping through the old album. One photo caught her eye, a small detail sending chills through her spine. It was her mother standing beside a man she didn't recognize, a stranger with piercing eyes and a haunting smile. The photo had no caption, just a single date, April 1985. Mia's pulse quickened as a cold realization settled over her. This man, could he be the one who disappeared? The one everyone feared to mention? As Mia sat alone, staring at the mysterious man in the photo, her mind raced. What connection did her mother have to him, and why had he disappeared without a trace? Determined to uncover the truth, she took the photograph with her and decided to seek out someone who might know more about the family's past. Her first thought was Aunt Louise. She had been the one, after all, who had alluded to dark secrets in the family. Mia found Aunt Louise sitting in a quiet corner of the garden, sipping tea. With her usual guarded expression, she looked up as Mia approached, a flicker of hesitation crossing her face. Aunt Louise, Mia said, holding out the photo, who is this man? And why does everyone seem so terrified to talk about him? Louise's eyes widened as she took in the image, her hand trembling ever so slightly as she reached for it. For a brief moment, her stoic demeanor cracked, and Mia could see a mixture of fear and sorrow beneath it. She pressed her lips together, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. I never wanted you to get involved in this, Mia, Louise whispered, her voice barely audible. There are things you're not supposed to dig up, things your mother has buried for a reason. Mia's frustration reached its peak. But why? What could be so terrible that even you're afraid to speak about it? I have a right to know if our family has been involved in something so dark. Aunt Louise sighed deeply, looking away into the distance as though contemplating the past. Then after a tense silence, she spoke. That man, his name was Robert Harlan. He was a friend of your mother's. They knew each other before she met your father, but there was a falling out, a violent one. After that, he vanished. Vanished? Mia's voice was barely above a whisper. Louise nodded solemnly. Yes, vanished. People searched for him, but there was no trace. Just whispers that he'd left suddenly, gone without warning. But there were accusations. People in town speculated, said things about your mother and him, but nobody knew the truth. And your mother, she never spoke of him again. Not after that. Mia's hands shook as she processed what she just heard. So, is that why she's so guarded? Why there's so much tension between her and the rest of the family? Louise gave a slight nod. Mia, sometimes the past is better left undisturbed. It's not always what it seems. She reached over, gripping Mia's hand. But if you're determined to know the truth, be careful. Not everyone in this family is what they appear to be. Her aunt's warning sent a chill down Mia's spine. The idea that someone she loved, someone she'd grown up trusting, might have committed such a terrible act was almost too much to bear. Yet the thought of leaving the mystery unsolved, of walking away without answers, gnawed at her relentlessly. Mia spent the next few days digging through family belongings, scouring old letters and photographs. anything that might give her more clues about Robert Harlan and her mother's connection to him. With every discovery, she found herself descending deeper into a dark web of suspicion and fear. Finally, one evening, she came across an old letter tucked inside a family Bible. The letter was addressed to her mother, its paper yellowed with age. The writing was faded, but one line stood out clear as day. "I know what you did, and I'll never let you forget it." The letter was unsigned, but Mia could sense the venom behind each word, the chilling implication. It sounded like a threat, something meant to instill terror, and yet she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something far more sinister than just a grudge between her mother and Robert. She clutched the letter tightly, her heart pounding. If someone knew about her mother's dark secret, could that person still be watching her family even now? With no one else to turn to, Mia approached her father, hoping he might shed light on the mystery. However, when she showed him the letter, his reaction was one of shock and denial. "Mia, that's enough," he snapped. "Your mother's past is none of your concern. It's time to let this go." But Mia couldn't let it go. She could feel the truth lurking just beyond her grasp, something dark, something horrifying. As she left her father's study, her head spinning with confusion, Mia overheard her mother speaking quietly on the phone. She pressed herself against the wall, listening to her mother's voice tremble on the other side of the door. "No, I can't talk about this right now." Yes, she started asking questions. "Don't worry, I'll handle it." Mia's blood ran cold. She pulled away from the door, her mind reeling. Was her mother hiding even more than she'd realized? For the first time, Mia wondered if her search for the truth would lead her somewhere she could never return from. In the days that followed, Mia's unease only grew. She could feel the tension in the house mounting, a silent pressure that seemed to weigh on everyone. Her mother moved through the house like a ghost, avoiding eye contact and speaking in clipped tones, as if something within her was on the verge of shattering. Mia sensed a storm brewing, a confrontation that felt inevitable but terrifying. One evening, unable to sleep, Mia found herself drawn to the family attic, a place long forgotten by most of the household. The attic was filled with dusty trunks, forgotten mementos, and layers of family history that no one had touched for years. As she sifted through old photo albums, letters, and keepsakes, she came across a small wooden box that seemed oddly out of place, tucked beneath an old quilt. It was locked, but her curiosity outweighed her hesitation. Determined, Mia searched until she found a small key hidden under a pile of papers nearby. She slipped it into the lock, her heart pounding as she lifted the lid. Inside, she found a collection of photographs, letters, and a journal. The journal, covered in worn leather, appeared to have belonged to her mother. Mia's hands trembled as she opened it, feeling as if she were prying open a door to a past filled with secrets. Flipping through the pages, Mia's heart raced as she read the entries. They detailed her mother's early life, mentions of Robert Harlan, and the nature of their relationship. But as she read further, Mia's sense of shock grew. There were passages filled with turmoil and pain, words laced with anger, resentment, and even fear. One entry, dated just before Robert's disappearance, read, "I can't go on like this. He knows too much, and he's threatened to expose me. I've tried everything, begged him to stay quiet, but he won't listen. He says he wants the truth to come out, that he's doing this for my own good. But he doesn't understand what's at stake. I have no other choice." Mia's mind reeled. Had her mother done something to silence Robert? She was beginning to piece together a story more horrific than she could have ever imagined, one that implicated her mother in something far darker than just a long-buried secret. Her breath caught as she turned to the final entry, written in a shaky hand that seemed almost unrecognizable. "It's done. There's no going back. I don't know if I'll ever forgive myself, but he left me no other way." Mia's vision blurred as she realized what she was holding. A confession. This journal was her mother's hidden past, a record of what had happened with Robert, and perhaps the ultimate answer to why he'd disappeared. Shaken, Mia closed the journal, her pulse pounding. Everything she had ever known about her mother, about her family, now felt like a lie. She had to confront her, to hear the truth from her own lips. The next morning, Mia approached her mother, clutching the journal in her hand. She could see the instant her mother noticed the journal. Her face went pale. her eyes widening in terror. "Mia, where did you find that?" Mia's voice shook. "In the attic. It was hidden. You've been lying to us, haven't you? About everything. About Robert." Her mother's composure shattered, and for the first time, Mia saw real fear in her mother's eyes. It was the fear of someone whose darkest secrets had finally come to light. "You don't understand, Mia," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You can't possibly understand what happened back then." "Then tell me," Mia demanded. "Tell me what happened to him and why you've kept it a secret all these years." Her mother took a deep, shaky breath, the weight of decades of silence pressing down on her. Finally, she spoke, her voice haunted and broken. "Robert was going to expose me. He knew things about me, things I could never let anyone else know. If he had spoken, it would have destroyed everything." "So you did something to him?" Mia's voice was a mixture of horror and disbelief. Her mother looked away, unable to meet her daughter's gaze. I didn't mean to, but one night we argued. It got out of control. He threatened me and I was so scared, Mia. I didn't know what else to do." Mia staggered back, the weight of her mother's confession sinking in. The truth was worse than she had ever imagined. She had uncovered a truth that should have remained buried, and now it felt as though the walls were closing in around her. But as Mia processed her mother's words, she remembered something Aunt Louise had said. Not everyone in this family is what they appear to be. Could her mother really be capable of murder? Or was there more to the story? Questions swirled in Mia's mind, and doubt crept into her heart. She realized that there was one person she hadn't confronted, one person who had remained eerily quiet through it all. Aunt Louise. Determined to find out the full truth, Mia decided to confront her aunt. That night, she asked Aunt Louise to meet her in the family room, away from the rest of the family. The air was thick with unspoken tension as they sat facing each other in the dimly lit room. Mia held the journal close, sensing that this conversation could change everything. Louise looked at the journal in Mia's hands, her face unreadable. "So you found it," she said softly, her gaze shifting to the shadows in the room. "I always wondered if you would, one day." Mia's eyes widened. "You knew." The realization hit her like a blow. Her aunt had known all along about the secrets, the lies, and everything her mother had hidden. "Then why didn't you say anything? Why let this go on for so long?" Aunt Louise leaned forward, her expression guarded yet conflicted. "Because, Mia, the truth isn't as simple as you think it is. Your mother was caught in a nightmare, one she couldn't escape." Mia clenched the journal, her heart pounding. "I read her words, Aunt Louise. She admitted to doing something to Robert." Her voice trembled. "But if that's true, why are you protecting her?" Aunt Louise's face softened, but her eyes held a sorrowful look. "Mia, you don't know the full story. The truth is darker than you think, and it involves more than just your mother." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "There were others involved. People who had reasons to silence Robert, reasons that went beyond family loyalty or personal secrets." Mia felt a chill run down her spine. "Others? What are you saying?" Taking a deep breath, Aunt Louise began to explain. "Robert had uncovered things about our family's past, things that, if exposed, would ruin us. He wasn't just after your mother. He knew secrets about other members of the family, secrets that could have destroyed lives. And that's why he had to be stopped." Mia's mind raced as Louise's words sank in. Could there have been a conspiracy within her own family? She tried to keep her voice steady as she pressed on. Who else was involved? And what exactly did he know? Louise hesitated, a flicker of fear in her eyes. "Some things are better left buried, Mia." Mia refused to back down. "You owe me the truth. If I'm going to live with this, I need to know everything." Sighing deeply, Louise finally relented. Robert had discovered something about a family trust fund, one that was supposed to be shared among the family, but let's just say some members felt entitled to more than their share. He had records, documents showing years of financial manipulation, secrets hidden by those closest to us. She paused, her eyes heavy with regret. He threatened to reveal it all unless he was given a cut. Mia was stunned. So, this wasn't just about a family quarrel. It was about betrayal, about money and power. Louise nodded. But your mother, she wasn't the only one who had something to lose. Others feared the scandal, the disgrace. So they encouraged her. They made her believe she was protecting the family, that it was her duty to deal with him. A sinking feeling washed over Mia as the pieces fell into place. They used her, didn't they? Her voice was barely a whisper. They made her take the fall so they could keep their hands clean. Louise looked down, her expression sorrowful. Yes, Mia. They knew she'd do anything to protect you, to protect the family. And when things went too far, they all stepped back, letting her carry the weight alone. Mia's heart shattered as she realized the extent of the deception. Her mother, painted as the villain all these years, had been manipulated, betrayed by those she had trusted the most. And yet one question remained. Why didn't you say anything? Why not tell her she was being used? Louise's face hardened. I tried, Mia, but by then, it was too late. She was in too deep, and they had enough influence to keep her quiet and to keep me in line. Mia felt a surge of anger mixed with sorrow. Her mother's actions, though unforgivable, suddenly seemed more tragic, a consequence of family betrayal and manipulation. In that moment, Mia's anger and sorrow collided. Her mother wasn't the monster everyone had painted her to be. She had been a pawn, manipulated by the very people she thought she was protecting. As Louise continued, Mia could hear the strain in her voice, as if she were confessing her own sins. Your mother was vulnerable, Mia. She'd do anything for her family, and they knew it. They made sure she believed that silencing Robert was the only way to protect all of us. Mia sat back, trying to steady herself. So who else knew? Who were the others? The shadows of family members danced through her mind. Faces she had grown up trusting, each one now a potential accomplice. Louise hesitated, glancing around as if someone might overhear. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Your Uncle Henry and your cousin Claire, they were the ones pulling the strings. They convinced your mother it was the only way. When she tried to back out, they warned her that if she didn't follow through, they'd ruin her. They preyed on her loyalty, on her need to protect you, even if it meant going too far. The revelation hit Mia like a wave of cold water. Uncle Henry, who always seemed to hold the family together, and cousin Claire, who had been like an older sister to her, these were the people who had orchestrated everything? They had painted her mother as the villain while they stayed hidden in the shadows? Mia's hands trembled as she tried to absorb the weight of this new truth. But why? Why would they do this to their own family? Louise's gaze turned cold. They did it to protect themselves, Mia. Henry was embezzling money from the family fund, and Claire, she knew too much and was in on the plan. Robert had threatened to expose them both, and they couldn't risk it. They used your mother's fear and loyalty to silence him. The room felt like it was closing in on her as Mia grappled with the full scope of the betrayal. And all this time, they let her take the blame? Louise nodded, regret filling her eyes. They let her become the scapegoat. Your mother was left to carry the guilt, knowing the truth would destroy you, destroy everything she had tried to protect. Mia's voice quivered with anger. She did it to protect me, and they let her. She clenched her fists, a fierce determination taking hold. They'll pay for what they did. Louise reached out, placing a hand on Mia's shoulder. Be careful, Mia. The family can turn on you faster than you think. They'll protect their secrets at any cost. Remember that. But Mia wasn't about to back down. This family reunion had turned into something darker than she ever imagined. And now she was the only one left to bring the truth to light. As she left the room, her resolve was stronger than ever. She would confront Henry and Claire, demand answers, and hold them accountable for the lies that had torn her mother's life apart. But as she reached the door, she caught a glimpse of someone watching her from the hallway, someone who had overheard every word. Her heart skipped a beat. Had her family's secrets been uncovered, or was this nightmare just beginning? Mia's pulse quickened as she turned to see who was watching. It was her cousin Claire, standing there with an unsettling calm, her eyes cold and calculating. Mia froze, feeling as if Claire could see right through her, could sense that she now knew everything. So, Mia, Claire began, her voice laced with forced sweetness. "Did you get what you came for?" Mia took a deep breath, her mind racing. This was the cousin she had grown up with, the one who had always offered her comfort and support. But now every comforting memory felt like an illusion, a cruel game Claire had played, hiding behind the facade of family. "Why, Claire?" Mia's voice was sharp, anger woven through each word. "Why did you and Uncle Henry do it? Why would you turn on your own family, on my mother?" Claire's face remained expressionless for a moment, her eyes studying Mia with chilling detachment. Then a slow smile crept across her face, a smile that spoke volumes. "Because, Mia, we protect what's ours. And your mother, well, she was always the weak link. She didn't have the spine for the family's darker responsibilities. Someone had to take the fall, and she was the perfect candidate." Mia clenched her fists, her heart pounding as she resisted the urge to lash out. "She trusted you, Claire. She trusted Uncle Henry. And you both manipulated her, made her believe she was doing something noble. She was weak, Mia." Claire's voice was ice. "She was too naive to understand how the world works. And so are you, if you think you can do anything about it." Mia's anger boiled over. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." The words came out harsher than she intended, and for a brief moment, Claire's mask slipped, a flicker of unease crossing her face. "Is that a threat, Mia?" Claire's voice dropped to a sinister whisper, her eyes narrowing. "You think you can take us down? Good luck. This family's protected, and you don't have the power to change a thing." Mia took a step closer to Claire, her voice unwavering. "We'll see about that." With one last, cold stare, Mia turned on her heel, leaving Claire behind, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. But as Mia walked away, a dark realization settled over her. If Claire knew what Mia had uncovered, then so did Uncle Henry, and they would do whatever it took to silence her, just as they had silenced her mother. Back in her room, Mia's mind raced. She felt like she was trapped in a house filled with predators, all watching her, waiting for the moment to strike. She knew she couldn't stay here, not after what she had uncovered. She needed to get out, to get somewhere safe and bring everything to light. But just as she was gathering her things, a faint knock sounded at her door. Her stomach twisted as she turned to see Louise standing there, her face pale and urgent. "Louise, what is it?" Louise stepped inside, closing the door behind her, her voice barely a whisper. "Mia, you're not safe here. They know you've been asking questions. Henry, he's suspicious. And if he finds out you know everything, I don't know what he'll do." Mia's chest tightened. "Then help me, Louise. Help me get out of here before they stop me." Louise nodded, her eyes filled with fear. "There's a back entrance through the cellar. You can take it and get to your car without anyone seeing." Mia felt a surge of gratitude toward Louise, the only person in this twisted family who seemed to truly care. But just as she stepped toward the door, Louise's grip on her arm tightened. "Be careful, Mia. Henry, he's dangerous. He's been controlling this family for years, making sure everyone stays loyal, keeps quiet. If he suspects you're about to expose him, he won't hesitate to stop you." Mia swallowed hard, nodding. She didn't need reminding of the lengths her uncle was willing to go to. She had seen it firsthand in the broken life her mother had led, a life controlled by fear and secrecy. With a final nod to Louise, Mia slipped out of her room, her footsteps soft as she made her way down the narrow, dimly lit corridor toward the cellar. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a gunshot in her ears, her heart pounding as if it might burst. When she finally reached the cellar door, she paused, glancing over her shoulder, half expecting to see Claire or Henry lurking in the shadows. But the corridor was empty, silent as a grave. She pushed open the door and stepped into the darkness, the musty air thick and oppressive as she descended the stairs. It felt like she was walking into a tomb. The dim glow from her phone barely illuminated the path, casting eerie shadows along the stone walls. But she pressed on, determined to make it out before they realized she was gone. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, a chill ran down her spine. The cellar was silent, but there was a sense of foreboding, as if someone, or something, was watching her. She quickened her pace, her eyes scanning for the back exit Louise had mentioned. Just as she spotted the faint outline of a door in the corner, she heard a sound, a faint shuffling, like footsteps echoing through the dark. Mia froze, her breath catching in her throat. Was it just her imagination, or had someone followed her? She strained to listen, her heart pounding so loudly she feared it would give her away. And then, from the shadows, a voice. "Going somewhere, Mia?" She whipped around, her blood turning to ice. Standing in the doorway, his silhouette framed by the dim light, was Uncle Henry. His face was unreadable, his gaze fixed on her with a cold intensity that made her feel like prey. Mia's mind raced, the exit so close and yet so far. The silence was deafening as Mia looked around her, trying to make sense of everything she had uncovered. But the closer she got to the truth, the darker the family's hidden secrets seemed to grow. She'd pieced together twisted glimpses of her mother's past, and she now felt a deep dread twisting in her stomach. Something was wrong, very wrong. Suddenly, a faint sound echoed through the empty hall. Mia's heart raced as she realized someone was moving towards her. She held her breath, hoping against hope that it wasn't. But then Uncle Henry appeared, his face unreadable, but his eyes cold. "Why are you here, Mia?" he asked in a chillingly calm tone. Mia tried to keep her voice steady. I know the truth, Uncle Henry. I know what happened with Mom, with those people." She searched his face for any sign of compassion, but all she saw was a steely determination. Henry's face twisted into a smile, one that made her feel anything but safe. "Your mother was clever, Mia. She hid so many things. But I suppose you figured that out." His tone was almost amused. "I'm just curious. What do you plan to do with this knowledge?" The realization crashed over her like a wave. Henry wasn't just a passive participant in her mother's past. He was deeply entangled in it. You helped her, didn't you? You were involved all along." Mia's voice broke, and her heart thundered with fear. "Help is such an innocent word," he chuckled, taking a step closer. "You see, I never intended to get rid of your mother's mess alone. You were never supposed to find out. And now, we'll just have to make sure you stay silent, won't we?" Mia's mind raced. She had to get out, had to escape. But every exit felt like a trap, every shadow like a lurking threat. In a flash, Mia lunged past Henry, her only thought to escape his grasp. But he grabbed her arm with surprising force. "Running won't save you, Mia," he snarled, his once kind face now transformed into something monstrous. She struggled against his grip, her heart pounding as she realized this might be her only chance to survive. Using all her strength, Mia managed to break free, sprinting down the darkened hallway. She could hear Henry's footsteps thundering behind her, getting closer with every step. She had to think fast, to find a way out, but every door felt like a dead end. The house seemed to close in around her, trapping her with nowhere to go. Then a glint of metal caught her eye. The family's old decorative sword hung on the wall. Without thinking, she grabbed it and held it out, her hands shaking. Henry stopped, an eerie calm washing over his face as he eyed the weapon. "Are you really going to use that, Mia?" he taunted, taking a step forward. In a moment of sheer survival, Mia thrust the sword forward, and time seemed to stand still. Henry staggered back, his expression one of utter shock as he looked down. Mia's hands shook uncontrollably as he crumpled to the ground, his face frozen in a look of horror. Had she really done it? Had she just confronted and defeated the very person who had haunted her family's dark past? The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. But as Mia backed away, she felt both a hollow victory and a lingering, gnawing fear. As the dust settled and police arrived, Mia sat alone, the weight of what she had uncovered pressing down on her. In her mother's absence, she had been left with a legacy of terror, of secrets that now felt impossible to escape. But even with Henry gone, she couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't truly over. She knew the police wouldn't believe the full truth of what had happened. They wouldn't see the hidden threads of obsession, control, and twisted family ties. Days turned into weeks, and Mia tried to return to a semblance of normal life. But every shadow, every unexpected knock on the door made her heart race. Had she really uncovered everything? Or was there another dark thread waiting to unravel? Just as she was beginning to settle into the quiet unease, a letter appeared in her mailbox. The handwriting was neat and precise, hauntingly familiar. Her heart dropped as she opened it, her hands trembling. The letter simply read, "Family secrets are forever, Mia. Don't think you're free." Mia's heart raced as she looked around, feeling eyes on her from every angle. She would never know the full story of her mother's dark past, or the lengths to which her family had gone to keep it hidden. But one thing was certain: the shadows of her mother's secrets were far from gone. And though she was safe for now, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, someone was still watching and waiting, and waiting, and waiting, and waiting, and waiting, and waiting.